Order, please. We'll begin the day routine presenting reading petitions. The Honourable Member for Halifax Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to table a petition, the operative signed by 108 members of the Nova Scotia Government and General Employees Union. The operative part of the petition reads as follows. We, the undersigned, call on the Ham government to withdraw Clause 46 of Bill 62 in favour of an extensive round of discussions with NSGEU and CUPE that will conclude by the end of 2004 about longer-term solutions to the funding problems of the plan and the possibility of joint governance or trusteeship. And, Mr. Speaker, I have affixed my signature thereto.
Petition is tabled. The Honourable Member for Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to table a petition to the Nova Scotia Government re video lottery terminals. The operative clause is, therefore, we respectfully request the government of the province, number one, to ban video lottery terminals, to be given training that will enable them to make use of the relevant curriculum materials. To that end, to end the harm done by gambling may be reduced. And I've affixed my signature to that, Mr. Speaker.
Petition is tabled. The Honourable Member for Colchester, Musquodoboit Valley.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table a petition signed by 160 plus Colchester County residents who would like the provincial government to bring in fuel regulations. And Mr. Speaker, I have affixed my name to the petition.
The Honourable Member for Annapolis.
Speaker, I beg leave to table a petition on behalf of the Guysborough and District Women's Institute, and the operative clause reads, we, the undersigned, hereby express our concerns over the cutbacks and layouts at Sherbrooke Village Restoration and request your cooperation in ensuring the use and the continuance of this valuable human asset. Mr. Speaker, I've affixed my signature to that as well.
Petition is tabled. Presenting reports of committees. The Honourable Minister of Human Resources.
Committee? Oh.
The Honourable Minister of Human Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to table a book entitled Votes for Women, a Political Guidebook that was put together by the Advisory Council on the Status of Women.
Table. Table reports, regulations, and other papers. Statements by ministers. Government notice of motion. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to read the following motion on behalf of the Honourable Member for Cumberland South and also, of course, on my own behalf, but I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Constable Bruce Miller of the Spring Hill Police Department lost his life in a motor vehicle accident on May 16, 2004.
Order, please.
And whereas Constable Miller was a very dedicated and professional young police officer who exhibited all the qualities and strengths of an individual who would be successful in law enforcement and was a great asset to our community. And whereas the words of Spring Hill Police Department Chief of Police Gary Copeland, Constable Miller was a wonderful officer who demonstrated his abilities as a professional officer. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the Nova Scotia Legislature pause for a moment of silence and pay respect to the life of Constable Bruce Miller of the Spring Hill Police Department and keep in our thoughts and prayers the member of Constable Miller's family, the members of the Spring Hill Police Department, their families and community as it mourns the loss of one of its own. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate. And if the motion passes, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to have a moment of silence.
Question waivers that agreed? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. I asked all members to rise and pause for a moment of silence in memory of Constable Bruce Miller of the Spring Hill Police Department. Thank you. Please be seated. The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas supplier development is an ongoing and important objective of the Government of Nova Scotia, and whereas the Provincial Design Requirements Manual has been changed to include Canadian hardwood grading rules after consultation with local manufacturers, whereas this change will mean that local manufacturers will have an equal opportunity to supply hardwood for gym floors in Nova Scotia schools, therefore be it resolved that all members commend those responsible for this progressive change and welcome the opportunity for local manufacturers in Nova Scotia to provide safe, quality gym flooring for our public schools here in the province. Mr. Speaker, I respectfully request waiver of notice.
For waivers, it agreed. All in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Rosemary and Mac McIsaac are the owner-operators of McIsaac Kilt Makers in the beautiful village of St. Peters on Cape Breton Island. Whereas their family-run business specializes in custom-made kilts, Highland wear, and Highland dancing outfits. And whereas in the past 3 years, the McIsaacs have seen their Canadian sales triple and their international sales grow significantly due to marketing activities that include customer referrals, online web-based sales, and brochure distribution. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House congratulate Rosemary and Mac McIsaac on their tremendous success and commend them on creating a product that strengthens the cultural fabric of our province. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers, it agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. There's been a request, order please, request to revert the order of business back to statements by ministers. Is it agreed? The Honourable Minister of Human Resources on statement by ministers.
Mr. Speaker, as Minister responsible for the Advisory Council on the Status of Women, I wish to speak to you for a few moments. I want to speak to the House about women in elected office. There are 52 members in the legislature. Only 6 are women. Even though women make up more than half the population of this province, we have the 3rd lowest representation of women in the provincial legislature, 3rd only to none of it in the Northwest Territories. Simply put, we need more women in elected office and at the provincial level at all levels of government. Today, the Nova Scotia Advisory Council on the Status of Women released a guide that encourages women to run for office. It is designed to help women who are interested in politics get involved in the process. It contains tips on fundraising, campaigning, and dealing with the media. A copy of it was placed on each member's seat before the session began this afternoon. Women are profoundly affected by decisions made by every order of government, and their voices are needed at the decision-making table for all Nova Scotians. Mr. Speaker, today I invite all members to take note of the guide placed on their chairs and to encourage women to help build a stronger Nova Scotia by taking part in elected politics and to support them in that endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you. Recognize the honourable member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The NDP want to congratulate the Advisory Council on the Status of Women for the publication of this political guidebook, Votes for Women. Our party certainly supports encouraging more women to run for political office, and we're pleased to represent 2/3 of the women in this legislature. Hear, hear. Our provincial party actually has a policy that encourages us to have 50% of our nominations women, and I'm pleased to say that 5 of the 11 federal candidates will be women in the upcoming federal election. We certainly support more women in public office. Women are the majority of the population in Canada, and we deserve to be represented at the political levels where decisions are made about policy, setting priorities, and funding. So again, congratulations to the Advisory Council.
Thank you. I recognize the honourable member for Halifax, Clayton Park.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It gives me great pleasure to rise today and to congratulate the Advisory Council on the Status of Women for the work they've done in preparing this book, Votes for Women, and encouraging women to take a more active role in political life in our province. As many of you know, women work hard behind the scenes, and what we need to do is translate that further so that they become elected representatives and are able to influence policy and the plans of the province and the direction that we take. And I think it's without question that women have a great deal to offer and a different perspective to offer within this House and in municipal councils and, in fact, in all elected positions. And I'd like to note today that our first woman elected to this legislature was in 1960, and her picture hangs behind me here on the wall. Gladys Porter from Kings North, and exactly. And I think it's important to note that it had taken us from 1918 to 1960 to have our first elected member to this legislature who was a woman, and that in fact she blazed a trail for all of us. And there's still a lot of improvement that we could make in terms of the representation of women here in the House. I think books and resources like this and the efforts of the Advisory Council on the Status of Women will go a long way to helping women, and especially young women, look at this as a potential avenue for them to influence the future of our province and to bring their many skills to bear here in making Nova Scotia all that it can be. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I recognize the Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries on the introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to bring the attention of the House to three distinguished gentlemen in the East Gallery from the Nova Scotia Federation of Agriculture. And I'd ask them to stand up. Mr. Doug Bacon, Mr. Don Cox, and Lawrence Nason. I'd like to welcome.
Thank you. We certainly welcome the three special gentlemen of the gallery today and hope they enjoy the proceedings. Were there any further government notice of motion? Introduction of bills. The Honourable Member for Waverley, Fall River, Beaverbank.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 55 of the Acts of 1963, the Halifax Regional Water Commission Act.
The Honourable Member begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 55 of the Acts of 1963, the Halifax Regional Water Commission Act.
Bill 82, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 55 of the Acts of 1963, the Halifax Regional Water Commission Act.
Will this bill be read a second time at a future date? Notice of motion. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas community newspapers have a long and proud tradition of providing information to Nova Scotians, and whereas the Atlantic Community Newspaper Association held its annual convention this past weekend in Truro, and whereas on Saturday night the Bowater Better Newspaper Awards honored the best community newspapers in Atlantic Canada. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this House of Assembly thank the hard-working and dedicated staff of community newspapers across the province and congratulate the winners of the Better Newspaper Awards. And, Mr. Speaker, I would request waiver and passage without debate.
Mr. Waiver, is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Conservative Party of Canada showed its true colours last week when the Conservative members of the Commons Agricultural Committee blocked a motion to levy massive fines against two major meatpacking firms instead of suspected of profiting from the mad cow crisis. And whereas these Conservative members took the side of the U.S.-owned meatpacking firms instead of the interest of farmers and consumers during the mad cow crisis. And whereas the Progressive Conservative Party of Canada is playing politics with farm families, therefore be it resolved that all members of this legislature call on the Conservative Party of Canada to start putting the interests of farmers and consumers first instead of protecting the large U.S. corporate interest. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Mr. Waiver, here a no, several noes, and notice is tabled. Next. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton West.
There's a saying, he who hesitates is lost. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas this past weekend we were tragically reminded of the importance of road safety when 2 young Nova Scotians died on our highways. And whereas 4 people have lost their lives this past week in tragic highway accidents, and whereas highway safety must be an overriding concern.
Order, please. No member Cape Breton West.
May I start over? Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas this past weekend, we were tragically reminded of the importance of road safety when 2 young Nova Scotians died on our highways. And whereas 4 people have lost their lives this past week in tragic highway accidents. And whereas highway safety must be our overriding concern when driving. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House encourage government and all Nova Scotians to do their best in keeping our roadways safe, and to express condolences to the families of those persons who have died so tragically in the past week. Mr. Speaker, I would ask for a waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waiver said agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Colchester, Musquodoboit Valley.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice, and on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Atlantic Community Newspapers Association 32nd Annual Convention was held in Truro over the weekend, and whereas at Saturday evening's Bowater Better Newspapers Awards Banquet, Angela Eisner of the Weekly Press in Enfield placed second out of 31 entries in the Best Use of Processed Colour category. And whereas community newspapers from across Nova Scotia did exceptionally well in the various award categories. Therefore, be it resolved, MLAs in this House of Assembly congratulate Angela Eisner of the Weekly Press for the second place finish in her category, and to all publishers, editors, reporters, and photographers for their studious work in bringing home the community to 2.2 million Atlantic Canadians every week. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Astral Drive Junior High School has a long tradition of excellence in athletics in both the capital region and at a provincial level. And whereas the Badminton Club for Astral Drive Junior High School participated in the Nova Scotia School Athletic Federation Badminton Championship on April 23rd and 24th, 2004 in Lower Sackville. Whereas at the provincial championships, David Cho and Jason Tibbard placed first in boys doubles, and Jordan Hurdle placed first in boys singles, and the team finished second in the province. Therefore, be it resolved that this House congratulate Coach Barry Black and the Astral Drive Junior High School badminton team on finishing second at the 2004 Provincial Championships, and congratulate David Cho, Jason Tibbard, and Jordan Hurdle for their first place wins at the championship. And I ask for waiver, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on Sunday, May 30th, the town of Yarmouth, along with several other communities across Nova Scotia, will be holding a Super Cities Walk for MS, a fundraiser for the Multiple Sclerosis Society of Canada. And whereas the success of the Yarmouth event since it began in 2001 is due in large part to the work of hundreds of participants and volunteers and their tireless efforts of the organizers. And whereas in their efforts to make this a fun event for all ages, the organizers have been successfully in encouraging the business community to enter teams of participants and to donate door prizes. Therefore, it be resolved that this House send congratulations to Derek and Francine Lesser, the organizers of this year's Super Cities Walk, for creating an enjoyable and worthwhile event that promotes an awareness of the issues facing MS sufferers and provides much needed support to the MS Society. And Mr. Speaker, I would ask for waiver, please.
Question for waiver is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Kings West on introduction.
Certainly a pleasure today to draw the Chamber's attention to the West Gallery and introduce 2 people well known in municipal affairs in Nova Scotia. The Mayor of Berwick, Mr. John Prawl, and the CAO, Linda Parker. If they could rise and the House give them a warm welcome, please.
Thank you. We certainly welcome our special guests to gallery today and hope they enjoy the proceedings. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the MLA for Pictou Centre, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Alida Williams was recognized in April for her contributions towards conserving and promoting the cultural heritage of her community by the town of New Glasgow with the New Glasgow Cultural Heritage Award of 2004. Whereas Ms. Williams was the first Indigenous Nova Scotian black person to be employed with a mainstream media outlet in the province, having worked as the family editor for the Evening News for many years before retiring in 1998, she, as the mayor said, has provided us with a window on our past and a look to the future. And whereas Ms. Williams has also devoted her talents and teachings to numerous community organizations, including Big Brothers Big Sisters, YMYWCA, Palliative Care at the Aberdeen Hospital, the African United Baptist Association, her local church, and other church congregations. Therefore, be resolved that members of this House applaud Ms. Williams for promoting all that is good about her beautiful corner of the world and thank her for being such a tremendous ambassador for the town and its people. And Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the member from Pictou Centre, I request waiver of notice.
Question waivers, it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Steve Giles is a 15-year member of the Canadian Senior National Canoe Team and has consistently produced top marks on the international stage, and whereas Steve Giles was recognized during Sport Nova Scotia's recent 2004 Sports Awards ceremony as June Male Athlete of the Month, Male Athlete of the Year in the Sprint Canoe and Kayak category, as well as runner-up for the Male Athlete of the Year. And whereas his time in the C1 1,000 meters, May 15th in the Montreal Trials, qualified him for his 4th Olympics this August in Athens. Therefore, be it resolved, the members of the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate Steve Giles, resident of Dartmouth South, Portland Valley, on his outstanding sports career and wish him well in the upcoming Olympics. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Which waivers, it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in 1974, Sheila States was hired as a child care worker at the Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children, and for 30 years, Sheila States has devoted herself to the care and well-being of the home and the children. Whereas throughout her career, Sheila States was a dedicated employee who rose in the ranks to assistant supervisor and acting supervisor. And whereas Sheila States will be retiring on May 21st, 2004, after influencing the lives of several generations of children who desperately needed someone to care. Therefore, it be resolved that all members of this House acknowledge the incredible contribution of Sheila States to her employer and her province. And I'd ask for waiver.
Question for waivers, it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Waverley Fall River, Beaverbank.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas members of the St. Thomas Anglican Church in Fall River held a celebration of their consecration and a service of thanksgiving on becoming debt-free late this winter, and whereas the Right Reverend Freddie Hiltz, Anglican Bishop for Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island, and the Parish Rector, Reverend Michael Mitchell, presided over the celebratory ceremonies, and whereas the church service celebrating the elimination of debt featured a number of beautiful hymns, a special presentation by the youth of St. Thomas, the celebration of the Eucharist, and a communion service. Therefore, be it resolved, MLAs recognize the parishioners and the clergy of St. Thomas Anglican Church of Fall River for their bountiful efforts in preparing their church for service of consecration. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Question waivers, it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax Atlantic.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Nova Scotia has a long history and a worldwide reputation for its strength and innovation in the cooperatives movement, and whereas the credit union, producers' cooperatives, and consumers' cooperatives have been at the heart of the rural economy for almost a century and now account for $5 billion of capital in the Nova Scotia economy while employing more than 7,000 Nova Scotians, and whereas credit unions have placed more than $8 million of debt in the past year through the Small Business Financing and Loan Guarantee Program. Therefore, be it resolved that this House congratulate the Nova Scotia Cooperative Council on its growing strength and resolve to assist its efforts, the efforts of the cooperative sector in Nova Scotia as necessary in the coming years. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas 6 athletes from Berwick's Taekwondo Club competed at the 2004 Junior National Competition on April 24th at the Dartmouth Sportsplex, and whereas in the coloured belt division, Christian Vogler and Cody Rowe of Berwick, Ben Palmer of Colebrook, and Thomas Balser of Dempsey Corner finished with gold medal standings. And whereas these athletes have trained extremely hard under the guidance of coach and trainer Greg Durling, therefore be it resolved, all members of this legislature congratulate coach and trainer Greg Durling and the gold medal winners on the excellent achievement for this young club. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Mr. Waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Human Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas generating student interest in the subject of science is a very important educational goal, and whereas excellence in teaching science as a subject is essential to creating student interest, and whereas Mr. Gordon Harvey, a science teacher at Hebville Academy, Lunenburg County for over 30 years, has been selected as the Lunenburg County science teacher to be honored by the Department of Education for 2004. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House recognize Mr. Gordon Harvey for his excellence and dedication to his profession in general, and teaching science in particular. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Request for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Pictou County Curl for Cancer event held on February 27, 2004 was a resounding success, and whereas the Pictou New Caledonia Curl for Cancer raised more than $16,000 thanks to the efforts of many volunteers and donors, and whereas the Pictou County Curl for Cancer Committee has been selected by the Canadian Cancer Society to receive the 2004 Circle of Distinction Award for outstanding leadership and dedication. Therefore, it be resolved that the members of this Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate everyone involved with the Pictou County Curl for Cancer event and thank them for their continued contributions. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Purcell's Cove was added to Nova Scotia's inventory of natural attractions Sunday, May the 16th, and whereas this 12-hectare tract of land was donated to the Nova Scotia Nature Trust, which is a conservation charity dedicated to protecting outstanding natural areas on private land by the Fields brothers, Roger, Nigel, Kenneth, Peter, Robert, Christopher, and Nicholas, whereas the parcel of land has been a popular area for hikers and swimmers for many years and now will be protected for the enjoyment of future generations. Therefore, be it resolved that this House congratulate the Nova Scotia Nature Trust and thank the Field brothers for their generous donation to the people of Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver and passage without debate.
Request for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Ronald Butch Williams was honored as 2003 Coach of the Year at the 20th Annual Sport Heritage Society Awards dinner. And whereas Butch Williams has been coaching track since 1991, and his philosophy is to make his student athletes better by promoting self-esteem and dedication, as well as improving their skills. Whereas 6 of his student athletes went to the Canadian Legion National Championship and won 11 medals, and therefore be resolved that all members of this House congratulate Ronald Butch Williams on being named 2003 Coach of the Year by the Toronto Sport Heritage Society and thank him for his commitment to improving all facets of the student athletes with whom he works. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Request for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in 1975, Liberal Finance Minister John Turner introduced the 2% litre gasoline excise tax. And whereas in 1995, Liberal Finance Minister Paul Martin upped this tax to 10 cents per litre. And whereas on January the 1st, 2004, the Liberal government saw fit to give its corporate friends, including big oil companies, $4.4 billion tax break. Therefore be it resolved that the member from Kings West should use his valuable time to write his Liberal cousins in Ottawa, asking them to spend billions of dollars they have taken from consumers to ever increasing gasoline taxes on the twinning of dangerous Highway 101 in his constituency. Here, I request, thank you.
Mr. Waiver. I hear several noes. The notice is tabled. The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas a strong regional and community hospital network throughout our province will ensure that Nova Scotians receive much-needed health care services close to home. And whereas on Wednesday, May 12, 2004, the honourable member for Kings West encouraged government to begin advertising for the upcoming vacant anesthesiologist position at Queen's General Hospital. And whereas as a result of questioning, a vacancy for this very position appeared on both the government and the South Shore DHA website on Thursday, May 13, 2004. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House acknowledge and commend the actions of government for beginning the recruitment process and wish both the Department of Health and the South Shore DHA all the best for a successful recruitment effort. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question waiver is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Human Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice, and on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Bridgewater Bulletin takes second place to no one when it comes to informing local residents of current affairs, and whereas the Bulletin staff shone brightly Saturday evening at the Atlantic Community Newspapers Association Awards Banquet in Truro, as they placed in the top 3 in 17 of the 35 categories of award winners. And whereas the Bulletin took home 8 first-place finishes in the categories of Best Community Service, Best Computer-Generated Issue, Best Graphically Designed Ad, Best Overall Ad, Best Use of Processed Color, Best News Story, Best Circulation Promotion, and Overall General Excellence in Class 3 of the awards category. Therefore, be it resolved, MLAs applaud the incredible work ethic of the Bridgewater Bulletin and wish them nothing but continued success. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Question waiver is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas May 16th to the 22nd is EMS Week in Nova Scotia and throughout North America, and whereas paramedics are recognized for their continued commitment and contribution to society, and whereas this week promotes their profession to the communities they serve and the patients they treat with open houses and a provincial public service announcement campaign, therefore be it resolved that members of this House recognize May 16th to the 22nd as EMS Week and thank all paramedics and EMS workers in Nova Scotia for their commitment to their profession and for the sacrifice they make in delivering health care in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
Question waiver is agreed. All those in favour say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the federal government in its 2004 budget began the process of creating the Canadian Public Health Agency, and whereas the Canadian Public Health Agency will focus on the management of infectious disease, emergency response, and chronic disease, and whereas today the federal government announced that Halifax will be the home to one of 6 regional centres which will specifically focus on the relationship between social issues and public health. Therefore, it be resolved that all members of this House acknowledge the role the federal government is playing in improving and enhancing the agenda of public health in both our province and throughout our country. And Mr. Speaker, I would ask for waiver, please.
Question waiver is agreed. All those in favour say aye. I hear no. Notice is tabled. It was my no. Sorry, it was my fault. Sorry, there was a no. There was a no. Notice is tabled. The Honourable Member for Pearl Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Eastern Passage Education Centre has a strong tradition of excellent athletic teams and has become a formidable force in junior high school athletics in its short history. Whereas at the recent Nova Scotia Athletic Federation Wrestling Championships, Eastern Passage Education Centre won its 5th championship title for junior males, placed 3rd in the intermediate female division, missing a banner by 3 points. Whereas Eastern Passage Education Centre won 7 individual gold medals, 4 silver medals, and 6 bronze medals at the championship. Therefore, be it resolved that this House congratulate the Eastern Passage Education Centre wrestling team on winning its 5th straight Junior Boys Championship, and thank Coach Derek Bridgehouse, assistant coaches Charisse Shepard and Brian Gowan, manager Maureen Eberstry, and all the parents, especially Mr. and Mrs. Wicker and Mrs. Jakeman for their support, and Christian Maé, Adrian White, David Jackman, Travis England, Patrick Mullen, Chris Jackson, and Carolyn Walsh on winning the provincial championship in their weight class. And I ask for waiver, Mr. Speaker.
Is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Morrison Junior High School cheerleaders have had a successful year, winning a total of 8 championships. Whereas in their effort to instill pride and build morale at Morrison Junior High School in Glace Bay, this group of students has worked extremely hard, along with Coach Ruth McCauley, to reach their goals. And whereas recently this group of dedicated students captured the Cape Breton Highland Championships. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this legislature congratulate the Morrison Junior High School cheerleaders for their successful season. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the South Shore Tourism Association Lighthouse Route Award is granted annually to a group, organization, or business who has contributed to the quality of visitors' experience in the area. And whereas Donna Hatton has been involved with promoting the South Shore through tourism for 14 years. And whereas Donna has been chosen by the South Shore Tourism Association as the Lunenburg County recipient of the 2004 Lighthouse Route Award in recognition of her contribution to tourism on the South Shore of Nova Scotia. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the House of Assembly congratulate Donna Hatt in receiving the 2004 South Shore Tourism Association Lighthouse Route Award for Lunenburg County and thank her for her promotion of the South Shore as a tourist destination. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Paul Black has won friends on all sides of this House during his years of work for the NDP caucus, and whereas Paul Black's skills and dedication were recognized when he was elected president of the Acadia Students' Union and when he was employed as a cabinet communications officer for the government of Manitoba. And whereas Paul Black and his wife Sharon Clark became the proud parents of Liam Francis Clark Black on Friday, May 14, 2004, therefore be it resolved that this House congratulates Sharon Clark and Paul Black on the birth of their first child, Liam Francis, and extend best wishes for all the joys of parenthood to Sharon and Paul. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Waiver is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Clean Annapolis River Foundation is a charitable, non-governmental organization created to work with communities and organizations to foster the conservation, restoration, and sustainable use of the freshwater and marine ecosystems of the Annapolis River watershed in southwestern Nova Scotia. Whereas the importance of the basalt deposits on the North Mountain to surface and groundwater recharge in the Annapolis Valley is part of a study being conducted by the Geological Survey of Canada on the quality and quantity of water resources in the region. Therefore, be it resolved that the province of Nova Scotia immediately impose a moratorium on all basalt mining on the North Mountain from Briar Island to Cape Split. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question waiver, is it agreed? Here no. Notice is tabled. The Honourable Member of Colchester, Musquodoboit Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the
Order, please. Order, please. There's too much noise. Order. There's too much noise in the chamber. The clerks can't hear what's being read. If all members have to talk, I'd ask them to take their conversations outside, please. The Honourable Member of Colchester, Musquodoboit Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas according to the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, the Federal Environment Department is spending $50,000 to discover how much methane cows release when they belch. And whereas the federal department estimates that 3% of Canada's greenhouse gas emissions are the responsibility of cattle, and whereas this estimate is based on data collected in other countries, on data that governments believe is inaccurate, therefore be it resolved that Nova Scotia House of Assembly encourages Ottawa to get more accurate information before spending any more of Canadians' hard-earned tax dollars on cattle belches. And Mr. Speaker, I would ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
And here no, the notice is tabled. The honourable member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day. I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Fire Service Exemplary Service Medal was created in 1985 to honor full-time and volunteer members of the Canadian Fire Service, and whereas on March 20th, 2004, at the South Bar Fire Hall, Gary Tatlock, John Tatlock, Wayne Pinhorn, Jerry Landry, and Tom Jones were presented with the prestigious award for 20 years of distinguished service in the firefighter profession. And whereas their duties are far from ordinary, ranging from fighting fires, performing rescues, and teaching fire prevention. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the Legislative Assembly congratulate Gary Tatlock, John Tatlock, Wayne Pinhorn, Jerry Landry, and Tom Jones on their Fire Service Exemplary Service Medals and for their dedication and service beyond the call of duty in helping preserve the security of our community. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question waiver is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Countermanded nay. Motion is carried. Or is day government business, the honourable government House Leader.
Speaker, I move that you do not leave the chair and the House resolve in the committee of the whole House on bills.
Agreed?
Agreed.
What do we got?
Recognize Deputy House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I call Bill number 26, Health Protection Act.
Bill 26, the Health Protection Act. Recognize the. Okay. Recognize the honourable member for Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, we have some amendments on this bill that were agreed to previously. We're prepared to table those amendments here today, but I would ask the House, if the House agrees, could we have a 5-minute recess, because our health critic is being scrummed outside there and he's going to present the amendments. So does that agree with you?
Agreed?
Okay.
It's agreed. 5-minute recess. 2:57.
Order. I'd like to call the committee back to order, please. Okay. We're dealing with Bill number 26, the Health Protection Act. Shall the title carry? Carry. Shall Clause 1 carry? Carry. Shall Clause 2 carry? Recognize the honourable member for Glace Bay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Page 1, which is Clause 2, we're suggesting to add the following clause. You can hand those out. And we have copies of this amendment. Restrictions on private rights and freedoms arising as a result of the exercise of any power under this Act shall be no greater than are reasonably required, considering all of the circumstances, to respond to a health hazard, notifiable disease or condition, communicable disease, or public health emergency. Basically, Mr. Chair, this calls for the wording to be somewhat changed to add the word reasonably to encompass pretty well the entire bill, as a matter of fact. And also on pages... just go that way. Just move that one. Okay, let me just stay there on clause number 2. That's the... and I think we've already had discussions. I think that the wording has been... the wording has been vetted through Ledge Council and the Minister, Mr. Chair, so that is our amendment on clause number 2. I would move that. Thank you. Recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The honourable member is indeed correct. The wording as suggested in the amendment that has been distributed to members is wording that my department officials who have been involved in the legislation have considered. They feel that this is wording that would make a positive contribution to the bill, and from that perspective, we're prepared to support the amendment.
Questions been called? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary minded? Nay. Motion is carried. Pages 1 to 38, renumber of clauses 2 to 118. Is that agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying. It's just the renumbering of clauses 2 to 118. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary minded, if any? Carried. The honourable member for Glace Bay. Well, actually, I was rising concerning clause number 5, Mr. Chair. Is that where we? We did. Point of order from the honourable House Leader for the NDP.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe because we've renumbered it because of that last amendment, the amendment would now be clause number 6 that we would be trying to amend, I presume. I haven't actually looked at someone else has my copy of the bill, but is that correct? So since we've renumbered it, we're now looking at clause 6. So I guess we would move clauses 3, 4, and 5.
Now 14.
Okay. Thank you. Clauses 3, 4, and 5. Are they carried? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary minded? It's carried. Okay. All right. Clause 6. The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The proposed subsection is 5.1.
6.1.
Sorry, 6.1 now. It was renumbering, and 6.1. In A, to delete the period at the end of the proposed clause G and substitute a semicolon. In B, add the following clauses after proposed clause 6.1G. And new sections to add H and I. Section H is provide a report to the House of Assembly on an annual basis outlining the progress of the Department of Health with respect to the surveillance of and response to health hazards, notifiable diseases or conditions, and communicable diseases. And I is after a public health emergency has ended, direct that a review be conducted and within 1 year report to the House of Assembly on the cause and duration of the emergency and on the measures implemented in response to the emergency. Mr. Chair, this is basically what we're proposing is for the minister through his department to report back to the House of Assembly on an annual basis, and it's a matter not that we it's a matter of accountability, Mr. Chair. I guess is what you're speaking of here, and certainly after a public health emergency has ended, that it be mandatory that a review be conducted, and as such, and again that the House of Assembly be kept up to date on exactly what has happened, Mr. Chair. Those are that's the amendment we're proposing.
Thank you. Thank you. The Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And again, I can indicate that the suggestion by the honourable member is indeed correct. This formalizes that which was anticipated to be done, but the fact that it is formalized really does add to the bill and adds to the accountability, and we're quite pleased to support the amendment.
Thank you. Does Clause 6 carry as amended? Is it agreed? Agreed. Clause 14 as amended. Carry. Okay, does Clause 6 to 13 carry? Carried. Clause 14. Honourable Member for Glace Bay.
Our proposed amendment regarding Clause 14.1 would be to add immediately after shall in the first line. B, to delete the period at the end of the subsection and substitute and C, add the following clause. B, to develop a communications plan and protocol designed to ensure that information necessary for proper response to the presence of a health hazard, notifiable disease or condition, communicable disease, or public health emergency is promptly provided to all necessary and appropriate persons while ensuring the appropriate privacy protections are adhered to. Mr. Chair, this basically is calling on that the protocol be there, a communications plan be designed and be developed to ensure that the necessary should be let out to the general public people, of course, have the right to know what's happening in these cases of emergencies and in these cases in the presence of a health hazard, and certainly that this would be a communications plan that is there and will be put into effect to handle all of these cases should they happen, Mr. Chair, and I so move.
Questions be called. Oh, the Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Chair, I'm having difficulty finding that in the Act. And is that the old 14 or is the new 14? Oh, okay.
It's now Clause 14. It was the old Clause 13 on page 5. Questions been called. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, if any. Clause is carried. Shall clauses 15 to 30 carry? Carried. Clause 31 carry. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Chairman, an amendment to Clause 31 has been distributed. The wording in the distributed amendment needs to be changed to reflect the change made earlier in this sitting. So it would read on page 12, subclause 31(1), line 2, and the amendment would delete the word technologists and substitute the word technology. It's a housekeeping change, Mr. Chairman, and I recommend it to the committee.
Questions been called. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Contrary minded, if any. Clause 31 is carried. Shall all remaining clauses carry?
Mr. Chairman, just before we
Minister.
finish consideration of the bill, there are 4 staff members of the Department of Health who are in the East Gallery with us this afternoon, and because I don't know when this bill would come forward for third reading, in the event that they may not be here on that occasion, I would like, if I might, with the permission of the committee, to commend them on the tremendous work which they have done in putting together this bill. And I would ask if, I know that they're they're perhaps a bit on the shy side, but I would ask that they stand as I read their names. Dr. Maureen Bakey, who is the Associate Chief Medical Officer of Health, and with Dr. Bakey is Dennis Holland, who is a policy advisor for the department, and Sarah Gorelick, who is a solicitor who worked many long hours on this bill, and Dean Hurdle, who is also a policy advisor. And I know, Mr. Chairman, that for these individuals, this bill has been their life for the past period in time. They're extremely proud of the work that they have done, of the input, and they're pleased with the input that they have had from all of the stakeholders, in particular appreciative of the work done by the NDP caucus and the Liberal caucus in terms of the improvements to the bill. And I just want at this time to acknowledge the tremendous work that they have done in compiling this piece of legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill 26. Does the title carry? Carry. Does the bill carry? Carry. Bill is carried. Recognize the Government House Leader.
Mr. Chair, I move that your committee do now rise and report this bill.
Agreed.
Chairman, on the Committee of the Whole House on Bills reports.
That the committee's met considered one bill, namely Bill 26, and the chairman's been instructed to recommend it to the House with certain amendments.
Order this bill be read a third time at a future date. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Would you please call the order of business public bills for second reading?
Public bills for second reading.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call bill number 64, the Capital Region Transportation Authority Act. Adjourn debate. The Honourable Member for Dartmouth North.
Honourable member for Dartmouth North, you have about 51 minutes.
Why, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I might make the attempt to complete the 51 minutes, and maybe I might even move into hoist since no bills have been moved into hoist yet this session of the legislature. And then we can continue on an even greater debate. Mr. Speaker, that will be for future consideration after I finish with my speak on Bill number 64. Mr. Speaker, when I had left on May the 14th, which was Friday, and adjourned debate, I was talking about His Worship Mayor Peter Kelly's interest and concern of connecting with CN unused rail to bring in high-speed rail transport to reduce the traffic and the congestion that exists on the Bedford Highway, and to bring the Bedford population who work within the downtown core of Halifax, and to bring commuters within the downtown core of Halifax as well, give them an opportunity to bring about an efficient, effective mode of transportation by addressing that issue through high-speed rail. I know, Mr. Speaker, that this would be an issue that would obviously be addressed by the new Capital Transportation Authority, but since we don't know how far away that is down the road, I want to speak a little bit about it, because I do know that the mayor had conversations with Via Rail with respect to the unused rail lines that in fact exist between Bedford and Halifax, and what kind of mode of rail transportation could in fact be accommodated on those rail services that are now available. Apparently, from what I hear, and I only hear this through the grapevine and through some talk that comes by way of media press, that in fact this is rather expensive. There would have to take a great deal of research and work, and to see if in fact it would actually address the real problems of traffic in the downtown core of Halifax and in the outlying areas where there appears to be some substantial growth taking place. So, having said that, as looking at that as one mode of transportation that needs to be seriously considered, and think of how advantageous that would be to reducing at least the traffic flow in the Halifax area. One can only imagine expanding upon that and looking at the Armdale Rotary with respect to how one addresses that particular issue, and if in fact that would be another issue that would be addressed by the Capital Transportation Authority. That issue might require a subway line or an underground tunnel, some other form of or mode of transportation that in fact would link up Herring Cove, Peggy's Cove, Highway 102 with respect to the pedestrian traffic. And I do remember, Mr. Speaker, out there at one time, and I don't know if it still is, but I do know that it was such a serious problem that there used to be a place where people could put their cars. It was a carpool. They would put their cars in this particular spot, going out towards Timberley, and then they would use public transit to come in. The whole mode of public transit in itself is such a comprehensive issue that really needs full discussion. I do remember that when public transit was in fact funded, and I do know the Honourable Minister of Transportation is very much aware of this because he's been around for a long time. And prior to service exchange in 1995, that in fact public transit in the metro area was funded by three ways. Public transportation was 1, funded by the municipality, 2, funded by what was then called the Metropolitan Authority, and I do know the former mayor of Bedford would be very much aware of that, and number 3, through a percentage through the fare boxes. And that percentage through the fare box was to be at least 40% in order to make those transit routes viable routes, and that in fact public transit would then be provided to those areas. That in itself, through service exchange, fell away because the municipalities were so intent on, in fact, provincial government taking over what was called then people services, community services, and the like, and there would be a service exchange with respect to those particular issues. And one of the real issues was with respect to public transit. Since then, and I certainly would hope that if this Regional Transportation Authority is given the power and the mandate, because we really don't know, Mr. Speaker, yet. We don't know what the composition is, who's going to be the chair, what its mandate's going to be, or anything of that nature. So I would hope that if, in fact, the Transportation Authority came into being, that it would, in fact, look at public transportation as a crucial issue. Because in my opinion, and it's only my opinion as a former member of council and as a member sitting here in this Legislative Assembly, that in fact, since public transit has been taken over, and I can only speak for the Halifax region, the Halifax Regional Municipality, that in fact, public transportation for many years has gone downhill. And public transportation has not kept up with respect to being innovative, with respect to being a #1 priority of the Halifax Regional Municipality. That in itself, Mr. Speaker, is another mode of public transportation which in fact really has to be considered. We also in Halifax, because we have such a huge harbor, and we have an international harbor that's recognized, and because of the international seaport traffic that takes place in the Halifax harbor, we have 2 ferries crossing the harbor. We have one crossing at the Woodside section and one crossing at the downtown Dartmouth section, and both of those ferries can bring commuters to and from their places of employment, their homes, and they also bring them in to be consumers across the Halifax side and so on. So it's very important to make sure that this is intertwined and joined with other modes of public transportation. That again, Mr. Speaker, would have to be one of those issues in which the Capital Transportation Authority, and I sometimes say, Mr. Speaker, the Regional Transportation Authority, and that's wrong. It's actually the Capital Transportation Authority, because the region could be quite expansive, and as a matter of fact, the Minister has brought to my attention that in fact the electoral boundaries of Halifax Regional Municipality is in fact the defined boundary in which the Capital Transportation Authority will have the jurisdiction in which to work. And that goes all the way, Mr. Speaker, from Ecum-Secum to Hubbards. It in landmass is larger than Prince Edward Island. As a matter of fact, 1/3 of the total population in Prince Edward Island is only that of the Halifax Regional Municipality. Because I understand under the new census that there are some 400,000 people living in the Halifax Regional Municipality. And I would say, Mr. Speaker, that that's a result of people out-migrating from small rural communities because of the lack of community economic development, people moving from even larger centers into Halifax because of the expansive growth in the marketplace and the job opportunities, employment opportunities. All, Mr. Speaker, which have an effect on transportation and the modes of transportation and so on. So that, in fact, has a tremendous burden on public transportation. And I'm get back to the ferry system because of the substantial subdivisional growth in the Dartmouth area, or within the Dartmouth defined electoral boundaries, that there is a huge number of people now coming back and forth across the ferries and using public transit. I think one of the key important roles of the Capital Transportation Authority would be the key role of making public transit king. I'm a firm believer that, and now we talk about the high prices of gasoline, and I want to go back to that. Bill 79 was here, debated in the House on Friday, and they giving 2-day notifications and so on and so forth with respect to gasoline. The high cost of gasoline, Mr. Speaker, will dictate to the Capital Transportation Authority what modes of transportation are efficient, what needs to be there, and the efficient modes of transportation that will be needed. And I said, Mr. Speaker, that I was quite impressed with my trip to Boston, and that's the only bit I know about, or the only real knowledge that I have with respect to transportation authorities. And I want to go back because it really, and I do know I said this earlier, but I want to go back again, and because I was quite impressed with how things worked. Now, the transportation services in Boston weren't done by the Boston or the Capital Transportation Authority. They were done by the state. It was called the Massachusetts Transportation Authority. And they looked at the modes of transportation once again in all the major cities and towns across the state. And it was quite something, Mr. Speaker, to be able to leave your hotel room, get on a public transit bus, take a ticket, and take that same ticket, walk down the subway, and take a subway into the heart of downtown Boston, and so on. You know, and it's incredible. And when I came through, and the Americans have this unique way of knowing about everything and the importance of it. Yes. And when I drove through the Sumner Tunnel, as a matter of fact, the cab driver had said to me that this was a toll tunnel, that it was so many feet below sea level, it was so long, and the measurements in which I can't tell you today because that was a few years back, Mr. Speaker. But nonetheless, it was these kind of linkages that the Transportation Authority was able to deal with. These kind of linkages, which in fact made possible my ability to travel from one end of that city to the other. And I have to say with general ease. I can't say that for the capital region of Nova Scotia. No. And if we look at the capital region of Nova Scotia as being that of the electoral boundary of HRM, then we've got an awful lot of work to do. And we've got an awful lot of work to do, Mr. Speaker, around how we address transportation. Another very important issue, Mr. Speaker, and I do know that the Transportation Authority, the Capital Transportation Authority, excuse me, might have the mandate, but it certainly doesn't have a mandate to deal with it now. And one that always concerned me was the marshalling yards in Dartmouth. Terrible. The marshalling yards in Dartmouth on the downtown waterfront takes away from some of the most beautiful opportunities to develop the Dartmouth waterfront in a way that would complement, Mr. Speaker, that of the Halifax side of the harbor. Right. No more would people have to come across the Dartmouth side of the harbor to say they want to see the beautiful Halifax harbor and look at the lights on the Halifax side. Not that we would want that kind of intrusive development over the harbor, but what we would want is we would want some control on the type of development that takes place. As well, Mr. Speaker, we would want to be able to have those marshalling yards moved out of the downtown Dartmouth to prevent a hindrance. And the only way I see that being done is by a Capital Transportation Authority that has the teeth and the mandate to do the kind of innovative transportation schemes, or to craft the innovative transportation schemes that are absolutely necessary.
Absolutely, absolutely. Beautiful.
Mr. Speaker, it's that, and there's sufficient opportunity for the Capital Transportation Authority to look at that with respect to how that's developed and how we can essentially move populations to and from. And not only that, it would also reduce significant costs, because when people start living on waterfronts, then in fact the people can turn around and they can certainly use a ferry and so on, which would reduce the cost of the bridges and so on once you provide the facilities. There has been a lot of talk with respect to the development of those marshalling yards. And Mr. Speaker, it would be my intent to certainly pressure the Capital Transportation Authority with respect to dealing with those. Another issue that I talked briefly about on Friday was with respect to the Halifax-Dartmouth Bridge Commission. No one knows the role that then will be played by the Halifax-Dartmouth Bridge Commission. Would that be a duplication of transportation responsibilities? Would the Halifax-Dartmouth Bridge Commission be folded in to the Capital Transportation Authority? Would there be a need for the Halifax-Dartmouth Bridge Commission and the responsible role that it plays? No one knows that with respect to this bill, Mr. Speaker. The bill needs to be specifically defined so as that we know what it is that this bill is talking about. You know, we need to know, again, what the mandate will be, what the compensation will be, because I do know that when I look at the Halifax-Dartmouth Bridge Commissions, and I happen to represent a constituency, Mr. Speaker, where both of those bridges happen to be within the constituency that I represent. Both of those bridges play a vital link to, in fact, the commuters of Dartmouth to Halifax, the place of business. I remember, Mr. Speaker, many years ago when Dartmouth was called the bedroom of Halifax, and many people used it only as a living residence for the most part and commuted back and forth by ferry to their places of employment down in Halifax. The opening of the Angus L. MacDonald Bridge, Mr. Speaker, in 1955, I believe it was the official opening of that bridge, was in fact the day that Dartmouth grew. It was the day, in fact, when Dartmouth started development, and the residential development soon came accompanying was the commercial development and business as well. Today, on that side of the harbor, as a result of the opening up of the A. Murray McKay Bridge, along with the Angus L. MacDonald Bridge, the twin bridges that now go across that harbor, Mr. Speaker, I would say to you, we have, because of that, one of the largest and the finest industrial parks east of Montreal. And that is because of the bridge linkage opening up. That, I hope, Mr. Speaker, is something that the Capital Transportation Authority will look at. The finest industrial/business park, Mr. Speaker, I should say, because Burnside is not only an industrial park now, it is actually a business park as well, and certainly has a beautiful campus setting overlooking both Spectacle Lake and Frenchman Lake, which in fact is a beautiful commercial environment there. Existing within a natural environment, Mr. Speaker, which in fact augurs and blends well. And there are some beautiful hotels up there. There's one hotel in particular that has most recently been built, the Ramada, where many commuters can see it as they drive through the 100 Series Highway linking up to the bridge. They can see that, and they can certainly see that the growth of that industrial park and the fine businesses that are there. That brings me to the other issue, Mr. Speaker. When we link up the bridging and we link up the street and the roads and the highway networks, that we have to have a plan. There needs to be a plan. And that plan must include one of the greatest riches within the metropolitan area, and that's Burnside Industrial/Business Park. That business park provides to the Halifax Regional Municipality some $28 million in real property taxes. On top of those real property taxes, there are businesses who are paid grants in lieu of that come out of that area as well, that general vicinity within the defined boundaries of that park. So, Mr. Speaker, there is a need to keep, excuse me, Mr. Speaker, I should step back a minute as well and say that I can't possibly guess how many millions of dollars come in here to this provincial government as a result of business activities in Burnside Industrial Park. The buying of consumer goods, the purchasing of goods, all which are taxable, and which in fact put millions and millions of dollars into this provincial legislature. Mr. Speaker, that again is why a Capital Transportation Authority, with the teeth, with the competition, with the ability to flex muscle, which has which is not tied to the arm of the provincial government, which is not tied to the arm of the municipal government, but an independent authority that allows a body to do its work to address these very real issues. Because today, Mr. Speaker, as I stand in this legislative assembly, talking about a Capital Transportation Authority, I do know that members on the government side have been talking about tolled highways. And I do know that a member of that on the government side has been speaking before the Burnside Commission with respect to a tolled highway. And I think that is something that certainly is not. Certainly, Mr. Speaker, they do have the right to speak to anyone with respect to their thoughts and their ideas. That's not the intent here. But the intent here is that we hope that under the current of government, that they are not the messengers, that they are not the ones whom, in fact, are carrying some unorchestrated, I shouldn't say unorchestrated, some message of government that really might be under the cover endorsed, but on the surface is emphatically implied that it's not endorsed. I do know that I was a bit disappointed in the Burnside, the Greater Burnside Commission, with respect to some of its members endorsing the request of a toll highway and saying that it was a mere 25 cents. Instead of standing behind their elected officials and saying, government, you do the right thing. You put in a road network here because because we're generating the revenue, the tax base, the dollars and so on in order for you to provide the services to Nova Scotians like healthcare, education, community services, transportation and the like. Instead, they turned around and said, because it's only a 25 cent token, without any study, without any plan, without any idea whatsoever what the cost might be, and how the private developer is going to be the one to set out the basket to collect the money. Without any of that, the Greater Burnside Commission and certain members had endorsed it. Well, Mr. Speaker, I hope that the Capital Transportation Authority won't conduct its business that way. I think there needs, and as a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, I'm also told, and I heard this through the grapevine, although I don't know how factual it is, but they're going to be sending out a survey to their members with respect to whether they support or not support a toll highway. I did say, Mr. Speaker, that I hope that that's a scientific questionnaire, that questionnaire, in fact, is one, or that question on that survey, is one that will stand the test of time. One that will show no biases, but one that will truly reflect. And as a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, I would say that there ought to be more than one question. There ought to be a few questions on that survey so to give a more accurate assessment of what people think. That, Mr. Speaker, is the role of the Capital Transportation Authority. Because the Capital Transportation Authority will, in its wisdom, determine without government interference at any level, what are the priorities with respect to the needs of Nova Scotians with respect to transportation. That will not be as a mandated or suggested or a recommendation from the Greater Burnside Business Committee. It won't be a result of the province of Nova Scotia. It won't be a result of the Halifax Regional Municipality. But it will be a result of the Greater Transportation Authority and the work that they do and the studies that they bring forward with respect to addressing this issue. I do say to you, Mr. Speaker, that in fact there have been many studies done with respect to transportation needs within the Halifax Regional Municipality. I'm sure that I can't count the number of reports, the studies that must have been done by a consulting firm called Porter Dillon. I don't know how many studies they may have been, and I do know that there are members of the Halifax Regional Municipality who sit on the government side, who certainly debated the issue of transportation in the Halifax Regional Municipality, and they probably debated it ad nauseum, Mr. Speaker. That's how much debate has been centered around the issue of transportation in this Halifax Regional Municipality. But I will say to you, Mr. Speaker, regardless of how much debate and how much talk has gone on with respect and how much study has been done, very little in the way of implementing the recommendations of any of those reports have been almost negligible. And the reason for that, Mr. Speaker, the governments always say that they have to live within their budget, and they've got this capital budget in which some governments, fine-tune the capital budget to say that, it won't spend any more than a percentage of the tax revenue that comes forward. It's fair enough, Mr. Speaker, as long as there's a prioritization of the road networks. And I see a tremendous role that can be played by the Capital Transportation Authority, providing, once again, Mr. Speaker, that it's given the mandate to carry out the role that is essential and needed to provide a commuter network in this, within this capital region. I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that we talked on the surface with respect to the needs primarily around commuter traffic and the need to move people to and from their places of employment, to move consumers back and forth, to move automotive traffic. But there's also another need, Mr. Speaker, and another essential role that needs to be played as well, and that's the role played by the transportation of goods. You know, we here sit in this legislative assembly, and we see huge tractor trailers drive by this legislative assembly day in and day out on narrow streets downtown Halifax that was designed many, many years ago, probably before your time and my time, Mr. Speaker, and yet we try to accommodate the massive transportation needs of commuting goods back and forth. Because we live on the harbor side of Halifax, we have the container piers, both at the Fairview container pier at one end, and we have the Halifax container pier at the south end, all which move a volume of consumer goods and services back and forth through the city. Many, Mr. Speaker, that have hazardous goods, dangerous goods, and goods that come right through our city as much as they possibly can, because there's only certain street traffics that can take that load. That's something, again, that the Transportation Authority will look at. Do we have high-speed road networks to accommodate the transportation of goods out of this Halifax harbor? You know, an ice-free harbor like Halifax, whom in fact is trying to promote itself on the international market scene and doing quite well, I should say, for the most part. But we're talking about piggyback rails. We're talking about a whole host of moving of consumer goods. And we are here in the heart of moving those consumer goods once they come from international destinations around the world. And Mr. Speaker, we often take it for granted when we drive by a tractor trailer and the trucks and so on and so forth that you know that's moving elsewhere. But we have to know, Mr. Speaker, that has a destination and where it goes. And we need to know for sure, Mr. Speaker, how we're going to flow that kind of commercial consumer traffic. We need to know, since we've cut out rail service of transporting consumer goods across this country, and that rail has taken a back seat to two tractor trailers transporting our goods. We need to know what kind of an effect that has on the existing infrastructure. We do need to know, what role that plays in linking up to rail services that transports consumer goods back and forth across the country. Mr. Speaker, the Capital Transportation Authority, once it has its definition, once it has its mandate, once it has the composition, and once it has defined its role, then, Mr. Speaker, we may very well be able to do something that's constructive with respect to the transportation of consumer goods. Commerce works on wheels. There's absolutely no question about it, Mr. Speaker. Works on wheels, whether it's flown in and the Halifax International Airport, although just outside the boundary of the Halifax Regional Municipality. I believe it's actually in Hants County, just outside the boundary, has a significant effect because the airport in itself brings in modes of transportation. Again, consumer goods which have to be transported into Halifax, where consumers purchase those goods from all across the country. Mr. Speaker, if I may, can I be allowed an introduction during my speech?
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity. But there's an individual whom is in the West Gallery of the Legislature today. He is also a member of the Halifax Regional Municipality, and he's a councillor for much of the area that I was talking about. His name is Councillor Jim Smith. So I'm wondering if he will stand and receive the warm welcome of this House.
Thank you. We welcome our special guest to the gallery today, the honourable member for Dartmouth North. You have about 15 minutes left, 17 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I just want to mention in my speak that it's fitting that the regional councillor would be in the Legislative Assembly today, listening to the speak on Bill 64, the Capital Transportation Authority, because he is very much aware of the number of outstanding issues with respect to transportation in and around the Halifax Regional Municipality. As a councillor, he's probably been there and seen a huge number of debates around this very issue. The minister in his speak, and I do believe it was in his speak, and if I'm misquoting the minister will certainly make me aware. But the Capital Transportation Authority's role is far more than just simply transportation, because it's the side effects of transportation that need to be looked at as well. And Mr. Speaker, that's with respect to the building of subdivisions. Those subdivisions, in fact, the size of those subdivisions, the impact that those subdivisions will have on the street and the road networks within the regional municipality. Also, the impact that those subdivisions will have with respect to 100 series highways, and I've said this earlier, I'll say it again, with respect to national highways.
Order, please. There's too much noise in the chamber. Ask all members to take their conversations outside, please. The honourable member for Dartmouth North has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I must say that 3/4 of the debate, it was very quiet, and I thought that I had the attention of the members of the legislature, that they were actually engrossed in my speak here today with respect to the Capital Transportation Authority. And I have to tell you that I was amazed that this is the first time that you had asked the legislature to actually quiet a bit. So, Mr. Speaker, I hope that I'm getting the message through to the Minister of Transportation and to the colleagues of the Legislative Assembly of how important it is to have a Capital Transportation Authority, but also how important it is to make sure that the role of the Transportation Authority is unsullied, that it doesn't have an arm reaching out from the provincial government, that it doesn't have an arm reaching out from the federal government, from the municipality, that in fact it has the power to do things on its own, the power, the mandate to set priorities with respect to road networks within HRM. Once again, the power to put studies. And here is a transportation authority, Mr. Speaker, that I don't see on the books as having that power. The reason why I see it doesn't have that power, Mr. Speaker, is that there doesn't appear to be any money or funding, or it doesn't say where those dollars will come from to the administration of the authority, to prepare any studies or any reports that are needed to validate the transportation needs of the province. And Mr. Speaker, when I go on to think about that and how significant this role will be, I certainly hope that it isn't one that hinders the possibility of the formation of a Capital Transportation Authority. I think, Mr. Speaker, that it's important that in fact the love-in continue with Mayor Peter Kelly and the Honourable Minister Ron Russell, Ronnie and Petey as I call them, and that love-in continue to stay there, Mr. Speaker, with respect to getting themselves together, and hopefully they will come up with an effort to address the issues of transportation. And I certainly hope, Mr. Speaker, that it isn't a kind of dragged-out process that happened with respect to the bill on assessments. The municipality, in its wisdom, said that, it could do the answers and it would address the issues with respect to the high cost, significant increases in the tax rate. It has forestalled. This is 4 or 5 years down the road. We had gone through an election on this issue. And still again, the government has decided not to step online. The municipality always crying about government intervention. and the government saying about the municipality not being flexible enough, that rigidity has set in. All those things are true. But I will say to you, Mr. Speaker, that Nova Scotians want none of it. Nova Scotians want absolutely none of this. Nova Scotians want, be it the municipal, provincial, or federal government, to address their issues. They want their issues addressed, and they want to see action taken on it. They don't want to see some justification as to why, or such an issue is extremely complex and it requires a great deal of study and work. I will tell you that the work has already been done. And I do know the honourable member from Colchester-Musquodoboit Valley, the beautiful Colchester-Musquodoboit Valley, sat on the Halifax Regional Municipality. He also has a great deal of experiences with the Trucking Association in the province, and he knows the demands and the pressures placed upon our highways as a result of transporting goods by the 18-wheelers and the trucks across this province. He all knows, and there the honourable member goes, he says, keep on trucking, because it's the wheels that drive the engine of the economy. Believe it or not, you know, it's again, as I say to you, Mr. Speaker, it's the consumer goods that come in by wheels, rather it's by the flight of an airplane landing its wheels on the soil to bring that good, rather it's the rails, the wheels of the rail train shuffling through towns like Spring Hill, Amherst, Colchester, Truro, you name it, into the metropolitan area. It is a mode of transportation that brings the consumer goods. Rather it's by tractor, trailer, truck, whatever mode of transportation, it comes here to the Capital Transportation Region, Mr. Speaker. And the Capital Transportation Region, Mr. Speaker, is where we need to have that kind of autonomy with respect to this authority. And I will say to you, Mr. Speaker, that to be able to stand here and speak on this bill is something that I'm quite pleased. Because first of all, I didn't believe that I would ever see the day that such a bill would come before the Legislative Assembly. Secondly, I still am hoping that in fact that this piece of legislation, after fine-tuned, after we know the mandate, and we certainly, and I don't know about my colleagues, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but I certainly will have difficulty supporting the bill unless there is some composition in the bill with respect to what kind of a structure this capital authority is going to be. Also, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to have to know what the mandate of the capital authority is going to be as well. And who is going to be well, we won't know the name of the chair, nor should we, but we should know, you know, if that chair is going to be an autonomous chair, it's going to be divorced from government, and it's going to be divorced from municipal government, that these are set in place, Mr. Speaker, that in fact there is the opportunity that this board, when it prioritizes those transportation needs for the capital transportation area, gets a thumbs up by both levels of government instead of political interference that might in fact turn away from the very real need of a capital transportation authority.
Order, please. I'll member Cape Breton West on a point of order.
Member, Mr. Speaker, be willing to accept a short question.
The member Dartmouth North accept a question from the member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and the honourable member is always open and receptive to a question.
The member Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I heard the honourable member indicate on a number of occasions that he wanted this, in his view, the Capital Transportation Authority to be autonomous and severed from the various levels of government, totally independent, as I understood. But yet, he was quite adamant against the fact that he was against toll highways, and I concur on the issue of toll highways. However, if they're going to be self-autonomous, how does he perceive or recognize that they will be able to fund themselves if they're going to be severed off? Or is he just simply expecting the provincial government to pass on funding to the authority with no checks and balances?
Now, member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the honourable member because I think that's an excellent question. When I said completely autonomous, I meant autonomous with respect to its ability to function, not with respect to its ability to have funding, because there would have to be dollars, Mr. Speaker, come both from the provincial and the municipal government to fund the actions and the works of the Transportation Authority. So I certainly hope the honourable member is clear on that. I think he brings an excellent question to the floor of this House. It is a very good question, and it's one that I hope that I've answered for the honourable member, that in fact the autonomy and the fact that it has the mandate to deliver, the mandate to be administrative, and the fact that it will bring policy and it will bring information forward. It might very well be that their recommendations might be tolled highways. But I would hope, Mr. Speaker, that the Transportation Authority would have some mechanism within it to create public hearings or to allow citizen participation. Because any authority without citizen participation and dogged on its own can be a dangerous device. And I agree with the honourable member on that. But I want to make it perfectly clear that when I speak of autonomy, I speak of autonomy on an administrative level. That in fact that be able to administer the policies and the research and the studies and the works that is needed. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to make sure that there are these two separate things. One with one with respect to funding, and that should be decided between the Halifax Regional Municipality in this particular case, and with respect to the province. But, Mr. Speaker, I don't know how much time I have, but about 10 minutes? Well, that's good, Mr. Speaker, because that does give me some ample opportunity. And I think that although this issue is dealt primarily around the capital region, and particularly around the electoral boundaries of the Halifax Regional Municipality, and we already know the size of that and everything, there are other parts of this province that ought to have some kind of a transportation authority as well. And, Mr. Speaker, I would be remiss in my speak if I didn't say, although this bill, Bill 64, deals primarily with the Halifax region, that there ought not to be, since there are two major regional municipalities that came into being and that were formed by legislative acts of this legislature, that being the Halifax Regional Municipality and that being the Cape Breton region, the CBRM, the Cape Breton Regional Municipality, that I think there should be some thought and talk about delivering a capital transportation system around Cape Breton and around Cape Breton Island. I know a couple years ago, I was down to Cape Breton, and Cape Breton had a major concern with respect to highway transportation that would help develop the economy of Cape Breton Island and so on. And there was a need for improved highways. A Highway 104 needed to be improved highways, but there was also the highway that's 105. Highway 104 goes down through St. Peter's and into Big Pond in that area. And the highway, and that linkage would have been very good as well, because it would have opened up a greater avenue for increased tourism and increased economic base along that area, which in fact would have enhanced the Cape Breton Regional Municipality. So, although this bill, Mr. Speaker, is in fact just here on a piece of paper, and it really doesn't have any solidity or any foundation to it, that in fact it's here and it gives us the opportunity to debate it. Hopefully, when this bill goes back to law amendments, goes across the floor, and listen to public debate and public discussion on this bill, and hears from people. I would hope that I would hear from people not only on Cape Breton Island with respect to maybe the possibility of establishing one there if in fact this proves beneficial or successful, but I would like to know, from the remaining part within the electoral boundaries of the Halifax Regional Municipality, places like Sheet Harbour, places like Hubbards, places like Muscadabat, places along Timberley, and in those general areas where in fact those people have the input and those people have to say. And as a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, I would even go so far as to say he can seek them. It's actually on the border of Halifax, on the Halifax County, on the Guysborough side. As a matter of fact, I've grown up in that small fishing village.
Order, please. Order, please. Member Cape Breton West on the point of order.
No, Mr. Speaker, again, and I do apologize for interrupting the honourable member's comments, but I'm getting mixed signals from the honourable member as to really what his position is, and if he could give me some clarification. He's indicated that if the people of a particular community have public meetings and they support the idea of a toll road, then that's fine. That's what the Transportation Authority should abide by. Could he give some clarification on that, because it's really confusing?
Member Dartmouth North has the floor.
No, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, it's a good question. And the honourable member, well, I will tell the honourable member in this legislative assembly that I'm totally opposed to toll highways. There's absolutely no question. And the point is that does not prevent anyone from putting a study forward, and that includes the Capital Transportation Authority. It would be then up to the hopefully through public hearings and debates, and hopefully it would have some kind of a process by which one would deal with that then people would be able to have their say. Now, a study is quite something different than with respect to supporting, and I want the honourable member to be very much aware of that as well, Mr. Speaker. So if the honourable member is getting mixed messages, it may be because from time to time he shifts his head in a different direction. And what comes in one ear, Mr. Speaker, may be that of somewhat different than the other ear. So I would just say to you, Mr. Speaker, that honourable member should put the earphone in, pay close attention, and be able to dissect the information that's given to him across this legislative floor in a manner in which he certainly doesn't have to interrupt the Speaker of the Legislature in order to find out the solidity of what's going on. So I would just say to you, Mr. Speaker, that these are important things, the issues. They're very important issues that is now before this House, particularly on this bill. And like I said, I am pleased that this bill, and the Minister has brought this Bill 64, the Capital Regional Transportation Authority, before the Legislature. I will once again say, though, that as I have said before, there's a lot of work that needs to be done with respect to this bill. There's a lot of time left as well, Mr. Speaker, and the Honourable Minister is aware, and I'm sure the Honourable Minister will be making dutiful notes with respect to those